Hello, everyone, and welcome to this installment of Recycling in America. In this series, we love to host conversations about what's working with recycling, what's not, and what do we do about it. So the partnership is very interested in how do we make the change we all need to see, and so we really want to focus on that last piece. So today we're going to be talking about crisis to correction. And it's about a conversation of how do we stabilize PET recycling in this country. I see folks are coming in. We've got about 350 people here, more than 1,200 registered. So as we are coming in today, welcome. I want to give everyone just one more minute, I think, as they're coming through. Oftentimes in these webinars, we have a chat feature where it's fun to be able to introduce yourself and where you're writing in from. Today, we do not have that feature. We just have a Q&A, but knowing that we've got a good international representation. Elise, why don't we get started and talk about our agenda for today? So welcome. Today, we're digging into a PET conversation that we started last month, raising concerns about the PET recycling system in this country. Today, we're going to check in on where are we, what's different from the last time that we met, and we talked about our conversation. And when we met a month ago and we talked about the challenges with PET recycling. So we're going to start off with an overview from Adam Gendel about what's different about PET recycling. And then we're going to hear from our value chain perspectives, experts in the field to give us insights of what's happening. And we're going to dig in through a Q&A where we want to hear your questions too. Today's conversation will be robust and interesting, but we're going to follow closely our antitrust guidelines. So the Recycling Partnership is subject to various antitrust rules, and we take these very seriously. That means that at this event, like any of our other events, anyone involved in this conversation must agree to not discuss the ways that materials can compete in the marketplace. So what that means is that we are particularly paying attention to prices and factors that affect pricing, but we're also going to avoid discussing disaggregated cost, customers, products offered, strategic or business plans or projections. Like I said, we take this seriously, and if there's any concerns about this during this conversation today, I'm going to push pause on it and move us to a new topic so that we all follow the strict antitrust rules. Our speakers today are a distinguished guests. Adam Gendel leads our PET work here at the Recycling Partnership, and we'll hear from him an overview of what's different from the last time we had this webinar. And then we'll get into a conversation with Adam, but also Kate Bailey, who leads the policy exercises at APR, the Association of Plastics Recyclers. We'll hear from Brent Bell, who's the VP of Recycling at WM, and we'll hear from Pete Keller, who's the Vice President of Recycling and Sustainability there at Republic. So we're going deep into the heart of MRF and recycling land to get to the heart of how do we create better solutions here. I'm your host today. I'm Keith Harrison. I'm the founder and CEO here at the Recycling Partnership, and I'm joined by actually many other staff. There was a bunch of behind the scenes folks who are here, but managing the Q&A, we have Chris Worth, Scott Mao, and Brittany LaValle. And these fine folks will be there in the Q&A. So if you look to the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see a little share Q&A box. And if you click on that, that allows you to put your thoughts in. So if you have a question of what was that acronym? What did they mean by that? Could you repeat what Brent just said? Pop it into the Q&A, and Chris, Scott, and Brittany will be there to help answer questions real time. They'll be pulling in resources and data to make sure that we're all grounded. And I'll be monitoring it to make sure that your questions make it to the speakers too. So this is how you can engage with the folks who are in this conversation today. Who is the Recycling Partnership? We're the US nonprofit solving recycling's toughest challenges together. And what that means is the Recycling Partnership for more than 12 years has been really dedicated to going after the trickiest stuff and working with everyone. So we work across the entire supply chain, right and left, red and blue, industry and eco warriors. We all want to find this common place together that we're working on building an entire system, better system for recycling. So a reminder that there are no silver bullets when it comes to recycling. We need a whole system to work. And today we'll talk about the 5 parts of the healthy system, understanding that when we're talking about PET recycling, we're talking about how it's designed. We're talking about access, which means can people do it? Engagement, which means do the humans do it? What happens in the MRF at the reprocessing and sortation side, and then the end markets, which means is that old stuff really getting turned into new stuff? And that will be the heart of this conversation today. So welcome everyone. I think with that, we'll go ahead and before we'll have Adam jump into a deep dive, and then we'll get all the speakers to introduce themselves. So Adam, why don't we get started with you? Give us a quick overview of who you are, and then walk us through where is the world today? What's happening with the PET landscape?
Sounds good. Thank you, Keith. Very nice to be here with everybody. Thank you for joining us. As Keith said, my name is Adam Gindel, and my work at the Recycling Partnership has specialized in PET recycling. I've been doing this for a few years, and as the conversation on PET recycling has pivoted firmly to the end use of recycled PET as recycled content and the ability of our system to provide that, that's where my attention is as well. So wanted to spend just a few minutes painting a picture of where today's landscape is, what the changes have been, and then as we turn our attentions towards solutions, how we can turn those different dimensions into different parts of the solution. So the next slide will show you a map of where PET recycling happens. So first, PET is collected, and in the US, that's one of 2 ways, either through a deposit redemption program in a state with a bottle bill, or through a municipal managed program that we commonly think of as curbside recycling. From there, all that PET goes to one of these facilities. There's only about 30 of them, which might be a surprise. So there has been change. And if you've read the news, you know that these dots are disappearing. So in just the last 12 months, 7 of these 30 have shut down and closed. We've run the numbers, as have some of our peers. We find this to be over a quarter of the capacity to recycle PET. Some of that capacity is in Canada, some of it's in the US, all of it touches US PET. One of the messages that I want to emphasize is that these facilities are not all the same. They're not interchangeable. They have very different characteristics. Some of them are designed only to touch PET from those deposit redemption programs. Other facilities are equipped to handle curbside. So if we look at just the facilities that handle curbside, it gives us an even sharper image of the picture, and it's more dire. If we look at just that capacity, that's over a third of it lost to the nation. So that's one dimension that matters. Another one is regionality. So we wanted to zoom in on 2 regions. First, the West, where I think all our eyes are on California, SB 54, the amount of material that's supposed to increase in the recycling system. Meanwhile, we're seeing the PET reclamation infrastructure going the wrong direction. So there are 6 reclaimers in the state of California. Capacity between those down to 4 reclaimers now. That's a loss of 30% capacity. Now, California has a bottle bill. Of those 6 facilities in California, 5 of them really only touch material from the deposit system. There were 2 facilities, counting the important one across the border in Vegas, that handle curbside material. Now there is 1. So that's what's happening on the West. No region has been hit harder, though, than the Rust Belt and the Northeast, which we'd like to show you. The numbers there are the most dire. So capacity overall is down 40%. And if we look at just the facilities, again, that handle curbside, there's a 2/3 loss of capacity. So very plainly, many of the MRFs in this region that had customers last month, a few months ago, a year ago, do not have customers, and they need outlets to send this material to. There's one more dimension that's not on these slides, and that's the end users who these facilities are designed to serve. So some of these facilities put out rPET, that being recycled PET, that's fit for use in new beverage bottles. Others serve the thermoform packaging market, that being all the PET packaging that is not a bottle, the trays and clamshells. In the Southeast, where these facilities have not been closing at the same clip, there's a lot of infrastructure that serves the polyester fiber market, everything from dog beds to apparel to carpet. Now, the fiber industry has been in decline for a while, but what we're seeing here are facilities closing that are the ones serving the packaging industry. So the sharpest version of the story we have today is that the problem is that there is less capacity domestically to turn curbside recycled PET into new packaging. That's the problem that we need to solve. So if we can go to the next, and I think my last slide, please. I want to put a really fine point on the turbulence that's out there right now. So the geography matters. Each facility matters. Again, the bales might be interchangeable commodities. The facilities are not. When recyclers navigate volatility and turbulence like this, they have to consider every option to keep the material moving. And I'm sure we'll hear about this today. The regrettable options of stockpiling material, waiting for better times. We know that some recyclers have to look at export markets that really haven't been there for PET in years. We also know that the market is at a critical point now where if it goes any further, we are going to see risk of landfill PET. And then we have to consider everything that comes along with that as far as trust in recycling and this mainstream avatar of plastic recycling no longer being recycled. So we do think that packaging is a big, big part of the solution. We think that putting rPET back in packaging at proven levels that have been done in the past and can certainly be done now will solve the demand gap, get those dots back on the map. And then lastly, of course, we need all of this action to happen as fast as possible. So certainly no silver bullet, but a combination of all of the measures out there, we think is absolutely within reason and able to make a difference. So I hope that helps paint the picture. Keith, would turn it back to you to add anything and get us going.
Very good. I like that you called out as one of the primary uses of the material dog beds. That means the dog bed market must be very expanding at a quick clip, huh? So let's jump in. Thank you, Adam, for giving the overview. I'm starting to watch the questions come in and our folks answering them there. But one, just to highlight, yes, the slides and the recording will be available to all. So let's start with some introductions. We'll go in order, Kate, Brent, and Pete. Kate, why don't you introduce us with a little bit of who you are, what organization you're with, and why this matters to you.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here today, and thanks to TRP for this important conversation. My name is Kate Bailey. I am the Chief Policy Officer for the Association of Plastic Recyclers, known as APR. Been in the recycling industry for over 20 years, so that's a big part of why I'm here. I'm committed to solving these problems. So who is the Association of Plastic Recyclers? Well, Adam also already introduced you to the term reclaimer, right? So those are the plastic recycling businesses that APR represents. We're the businesses that take your plastic water bottles, your milk jugs, your yogurt containers, your plastic bags. Each and every day we buy them from Republic, from WM, from your city-run programs. We wash them, sort them, grind them, process them, and we make them into new recycled plastic flake, plastic pellet, plastic sheet that we then sell to manufacturers to make into new products. So for those of you at the municipal city level, many of you think of the plastic reclaimers as the quote end markets, right? This is where your materials are getting sent to. But one of the important things we'll talk about today is that plastic recyclers are not the end market. We are, one more step in the process, but the most important step is we are able to sell those recycled plastics to manufacturers to make new products. That's where we're seeing the system falling apart. Frankly, we're seeing the worst PET markets that we've seen in 25 years. So I just want to underscore, you got WM, Republic here coming together with TRP, two biggest recyclers in the country, saying there is a serious problem. So this is not just a normal market downturn. This is a serious situation that is solvable, and looking forward to talking more about those solutions soon.
Thank you, Kate. Brent, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Keith. I will say, those slides were a little bit depressing, but they're consistent with what we've seen over the last 2 months. I'm Brent Bell. I run the recycling group for WM. I've been here for 29 years. Hopefully, at this call, if we get things right size, and then maybe I can make it 30 years, but it'll be dependent on the outcome of this, I'm sure. We've invested over $1.5 billion on the recycling infrastructure, automated sites, new investments, new markets. And really what that means for this is that as these sites come online, we're making record levels of recycled materials, including PET, than we ever had before in the history of WM. So that's the good news is we're actually capturing more material from our curbside programs than we ever had before. Adam kind of mentioned this. One of the big things as a processor is we have to move material. Moving material is essential to this business. We don't have room to store material, and so it has to find good end markets. To give you a quick example of what that looks like for us, on the PET side alone, we move about 700 loads a month. So that's about 700 trucks a month that have to find a home. And you saw those dots as they disappear. That puts more pressure on this system. And so, we are definitely committed to trying to find a solution to this issue. But as more domestic facilities close down, we're faced with lack of end markets. At the same time, we're seeing more supply than we've ever seen before. So happy to continue this conversation, Keith.
All right. So the good thing is that people are doing what we need. We're getting more in. We're just all surprised that there's a problem with where to send it. And so, Pete, why don't you say hello and tell me if that's what you're saying too?
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for having us. My name is Pete Keller. I'm Vice President of Recycling and Sustainability at Republic Services. Just a little bit about Republic. We're a large integrated recycling waste environmental services company, 42,000 employees, 1,000 dots on the map. We're in all 50 states and Canada. I would tell this audience that we're in a singular position in the rPET marketplace. We produce curbside bales from 80 recycling facilities. We produce clear hot wash flake from 2 polymer centers. We've got a 3rd polymer center under construction in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And through a joint venture that we have, we call it Blue Polymers, we create L&O pellet for the beverage industry in Southern California. So I don't know if we were one of those red dots that maybe went red and then went back to green. But that was a facility that closed down within the last 12 months that we acquired. So we're as integrated in the space today as anybody. Curbside collection all the way through pellet production. Traceable, transparent, 100% post-consumer, domestically sourced. But like Brent said, when you've got published indices at 0, and you've got 700 truckloads a month, you got to figure out where to send. Liquidity becomes a big concern. So, I know we'll get into imports and some other things that are occurring in the marketplace. There's some structural deficiencies in some of the existing contracts. That's a big reason. And I see this popping up in the question box, but that's a big reason some of these folks have gone under. So happy to be here and happy to have this conversation.
Awesome. Okay, so I think, folks, here's how we're going to structure today. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the grounding of where we are, what are the latest repercussions, and that's what our speakers are already jumping into. And then we're going to spend some time talking about short-term solutions and long-term solutions. So we're thinking about it as like, what's the life support for the patient right now? And then how do we get them into diet and exercise for long-term survival? So that's what we're going to walk through today. I'm seeing a lot of questions come through on the policy sphere of like, can't EPR take care of this? So I think that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to dig into. So let's get started. Kate, why don't you kick us off with some grounding of where we are? Like, is today's disruption of PET, is recycling failing? Whose fault is this? Where's the problem?
So if people hear me say nothing else today, hear me say this. This is not the failure of plastic recycling. We know how to recycle plastics. We are doing it today. We can do it a lot better, and we know how to do it better. But we are all here today because we are seeing some serious cracks in the foundation that we need to fix if we are going to stay on course and solve these problems. So we're here talking today about PET water bottles, soda bottles, thermoforms. They are the most widely recycled plastic packaging on the market. We know how to recycle pretty much every piece of PET packaging that comes in on the market. This is a solvable problem. But the failure is not on the recycling side. It's not the collection, it's not the processing. When reclaimers buy the bales from the MRF, we turn them into recycled flake, recycled pellet. We then have to sell them to manufacturers to make new products. We need buyers. Recyclers need buyers. That is where the system is breaking down. So who are the buyers? What does that mean? I mean, the companies, the manufacturers who are making water and soda bottles, who are making salad containers, ketchup and shampoo bottles, or making carpet and dog beds and polyester and all of those things. Anyone using PET has two choices when it comes to buying. They can buy new virgin PET plastic, which they buy a lot of, and they often, pretty much buy, that's mostly what they buy. Second, they can buy recycled, which is what we want to see. That's how we have a healthy recycling system. But it turns out buying recycled can mean buying from US programs, or it can mean from buying overseas. And what we've seen is a huge surge in the last couple of years where companies are buying now 25% of recycled PET is coming from imports. What does this mean? It means companies are not buying from you in Toledo, Ohio. They're buying from Taiwan instead. That is the problem we need to fix. We need to support the domestic recycling infrastructure first. We need those buyers committed to buying from the materials you are putting in your bin. This is all about the buyer end of things and making sure that companies choose to buy recycled plastic instead of buying new plastic. And when they choose recycled, they're choosing from US programs first.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is this is not a failure of recycling. So I back that up. Brent said he's getting plenty in the door. Brent and Pete both talked about plenty in the door and vertical integration into getting it into process. Kate, your members are making sure the old stuff is getting reprocessed and ready. It's just that no one is buying it. And I think, Adam, dig in here more because you showed a little bit of a difference between the fiber and the packaging model. So can you tell us a little bit more about domestic end markets? And when we say domestic, we mean North American, right?
Yes, and I think that's an important point. So yes, so we've studied this a lot, and the in markets domestically. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought entirely. Keith, will you just restate the question, please?
Yes, so we were talking about Kate's point is that it's being collected, it's being sorted. Her members are processing it, but they don't have the end market. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more on the PET recycling system and the need for robust end markets, North American end markets.
Thank you. My mind is still on dog beds because my dog is barking.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think the whole direction that recycling is going right now is one with more transparency, more traceability. Pete, you said those words. I hope we get back to them. More product stewardship. And I think it's a lot of eyes on the packaging community. It's the packaging that's in the waste stream, and especially with EPR, the emphasis on responsible in markets. So part of that is making sure that what gets collected for recycled actually gets recycled. Part of it is making sure it's done with best practices, done responsibly. And there's certainly an emphasis on those markets being here. So it's what the regulators want to see. There's some common sense behind it. The US generates more waste per capita than anywhere else on planet Earth. We ought to have infrastructure here that can handle the waste that we make. So I would look back to packaging. We can track the use of recycled content by the packaging in markets over time. There has been significant change. Bottles are using more than ever before. Carpet is using less than ever before. Thermoform packaging is using less than ever before. So everyone's got a role to play. There are going to be different roles for the different communities. So,
good. So I think, Brent, maybe if you can pick up Adam's thread and take it a little bit more to talk about the financial decisions that you're making at WM about these markets. But as you do, Brent, could you also jump in? I see a lot of people in the Q&A saying, wait a minute, but why aren't they buying North American? Why are they prioritizing something else? So if you could tie those together, that'd be really helpful for folks.
Yeah, so you can appreciate we've got a lot of great in markets here in North America and customer contacts, and so when they close their facilities down or are completely closed up, then our first question is always, why are you guys closing? Why what's going on? And what we've heard started about, probably early last year, right, is this massive amount of imports that are coming in that are, replacing, what was once a, home for recycled PET is now getting replaced by imported material. So really the economics are really challenging. And even if you look at, tariffs and other financial kind of penalties, if you will, for, imports or non, US recycled PET, it really pales in comparison to the gap between, the alternative prices versus recycled PET prices. And so that's when we're really trying to say, what can we do to get more buyers in the door so that more of these reclaimers stay open and continue to invest. Now's the time where we should hopefully be seeing more investments in this, because as EPR comes on board, we're inherently going to have way more recycled material developed in the US, which is all of our goals, increase the recycling rate. But at the same time, we're seeing these reclaimers close down, and so that's really a bad recipe that we're going to have in the next few months if we don't resolve that quickly. So that's when we really got to understand the gap between what's it going to take to attract, whether it's policy or some other incentive, to get the buyers back in for domestic recycled PET. And then again, I think we're all on this call to know, we communicate with our municipalities and we're transparent on the disruptions that are taking place today. And the last thing we want to do is have more distrust in a recycling system. As we're gaining all this momentum, this is really, I'll be quite honest, this is a bad sign for us if we can't get this one fixed, because PET is probably one of the most widely recognizable items in a recycling bin. And to tell a municipality we can't find homes for it is not a great conversation to have.
That's the threat, right? Like, why is PET so central to all this conversation? Well, it is iconically recyclable. It is the core to the marketplace. It is an anchor for blended values for MRF. It is the trust angle for the public, and I see that coming up in our question. So I think that's why we're having this really critical conversation. It'd be easy to kind of brush it under the rug and hope that it gets better, but all of us are committed to making sure that it's resolved. So, Pete, maybe you'll jump in a little bit more and kind of wrap us up here with the grounding of, you talked about your vertical integration. What's changing with your polymer center model because of this marketplace? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so I mentioned the third facility is under construction in Pennsylvania, so that'll give us dots on the map, west, Midwest, Northeast. We had previously announced a plan to build four. And possibly six. We had stated that publicly. In our last earnings call, we announced that we were hitting the pause button on copy number four. So, with the current market condition, and listen, 7, 8 facilities have closed, and we're standing new ones up. So, you know, it's we have to question ourselves, right? So we're still committed to expanding that network. A fourth one would give us truly a nationwide hub and spoke model to our 80 recycling facilities, but because of the current market conditions, we've hit pause. Listen, I've been in the commodities business for a long time, and I've often said price settles, and I know we're not talking about price, but price settles on the last 5% of the trade. When 25% of the consumption is imported material of questionable origin, right? There's a structural problem in the marketplace,
Yeah.
right? The all the settlement is just down, down, down. There's no other way to state that. So, I think Brent mentioned public policy. I'll say it out loud. There needs to be a focus on domestically sourced material.
Yep.
We
Well,
know we know the EU is moving to that type of policy, and if they do, um, that just means more imports coming to the U.S.
that's right. So let's dig in. I think that's a perfect transition, Pete, to get into, okay, so what do we do about it? And speakers, if we can kind of break this into short term, long term, we're keeping the patient alive and we're getting everybody healthy again. Kate, why don't you kick us off talking about EPR? Now, there's a lot of hope that EPR will do it, but EPR is about supply, right? It gets it out of the house. It's not necessarily about demand, making sure the old stuff turns to new stuff. So I see a bunch of questions here. Why don't you jump in with starting with EPR and ideas of short versus long term?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So first I want to start by saying APR fully supports EPR, packaging EPR. It is an essential policy to improve plastic solution. It is a must-have. However, it is about shifting the funding. It is making sure local governments aren't the ones to pay for recycling, that the producers of the packaging have a role to play in paying for recycling. So yeah, it's really focused on getting them, collecting the materials, the education, reducing contamination. And it was never promised by anyone to be the silver bullet or the only thing we are going to do to improve recycling or reduce plastic waste. So there are several things that good EPR can do to help drive market demand. First, you can actually set recycled content targets as part of your EPR law. So Colorado has this, Washington is rolling this out, so we're seeing some of that happen. EPR also has bonuses, or we like to say eco-modulation incentives that can reward producers who are buying more recycled content. Those could be rewarding domestic recycled content. EPR can also be really useful for tracking the amount of recycled content or driving investments into new plastics reclaimers, new processing. So there's lots of good things that EPR actually can do to help this. But let's be honest about where we are. We only have 7 states with EPR laws, and we have a national problem. We only have 1 state that's actually started their EPR program, which is Oregon. So yes, EPR can be helpful, but we are talking years down the road before the tools are in place to actually make that part of the solution. So short answer, EPR, definitely part of the solution, but a little bit more longer term is going to take some work to make it happen.
Hey, Kate, while I have you, can you do a clarification of a question that came in? There was some question about your 25% of PET purchased coming from imports. Was that 25% of virgin, rPET, both? Do you remember? Can you clarify that for us?
Yes. 25% of recycled PET, so the recycled PET being used today is from imported sources. So that's numbered through NAPCOR, great organization doing some great tracking. There's always been some use of imported materials, but we've really seen that skyrocket over the last couple of years now up to fully a quarter of all the material being used in recycled PET.
Thank you. So let's hear from the MRFs. Pete, why don't you jump in here with demand signals, some questions about like multi-year offtake agreements or clearer quality. How does quality play in here? What are some of the demand signals that you're looking at to stabilize the market?
Yeah, I think it depends on structure, right? Multi-year agreements are easy, but buyers don't want to lock themselves in necessarily to fixed pricing, floors, ceilings, things like that. I mentioned in my opening comments, there's some structural deficiencies in the marketplace. A lot of the pellet pricing is tied to the price of a bale. And, there's so much airspace between a bale and a pellet. Adam talked about different technologies, and some of these converters are set up to supply strapping, some are set up to supply carbonated beverage. So, we've had a lot of interesting conversations, Keith, with pretty much everybody in the space. Um, it's, I, you've said it a couple times, there's no silver bullet here. I don't know what the best transaction looks like, right?
Yeah.
Signals, all the brand owners are interested in the material. They're interested in the transparency, the traceability, the domestic supply. They haven't figured out how to value it, right? So I'm being more candid than I should be. We got 662 people here. You've got sustainability folks within organizations. You've got procurement folks within organizations, right? And then you've got stakeholders, shareholders, investors, all those types of things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how to say it more plainly than they just haven't figured out how to value it.
Well, Brent, I'd love your take on that. And as you jump in, maybe if you could also address some questions could you just help us understand the global movement of this? So are North American MRFs selling this to Asia that then's coming back as cheap rPET and it's so we're undercutting, or how does the material flow kind of play into that? Can you help? I see a bunch of questions about that.
Yeah. So I definitely say finding in markets. We've got a very robust team, WM that is really good at finding homes for these materials. And then that's obviously been a challenge over the last few months on where do these homes end up at. I can say with it's a little bit like glass. I won't mention pricing, but it's a little bit like glass right now, which is when you're paying people to take it, then you get a lot more buyers at hand, and so that always attracts attention from outlets that you wouldn't necessarily call traditional outlets. And so we're obviously looking at those now as well. But the biggest gap is to get back to the bottle to bottle folks is we've got to address what incentives can we make for the brands to kind of come back in to buy, right? Whenever minimum content legislation used to pass a few years ago, I remember being very excited about that, saying this is what we need. We need minimum content legislation. And then you see some of the stats with the penalties they've enforced, and it's so immaterial that any business person would say just pay the fine and move on, right? So all these policies we think of, I feel like one thing that folks really do need to understand is the economic gap that the brands are challenged with right now. And it's tens of millions of dollars. And so to think that a $100,000 penalty is going to hurt them, it doesn't drive incentive. You've got to get some policy that really drives behavior changes if you want the domestic recycled PET markets to survive.
I think I'm seeing some notes in the chat from people I know who have been in recycling for a long time with some ideas around alternative procurement models and this. So I think the chat has some healthy ideas about this. But maybe Adam, you can dig a little bit more in here in the bottle to bottle type work, or thinking about thermoforms, textiles, carpet, and non-bottle applications. How should we think about that?
Yeah, so I think we're all kind of tuning in on all of the nuance that there is to the solutions, but also no silver bullet, but the answer is easy. The stuff has to get used in new stuff, and then everything else works itself out. I think I mentioned earlier that bottles look like they're using more recycled PET than ever before. We do have to overlay the amount of that rPET that comes from overseas sources, as we have to do with every other end user as well, to understand what's really going on. I think the thermoform segment deserves attention, and to make sure we're all grounded, thermoform is the weird recycling term for all of the PET that's not a bottle. Every clamshell, tray, domed salad lid, whatever. That's a different manufacturing process than the one used to make bottles. It's a bit more forgiving in some certain areas than bottle manufacturing can be. Importantly, thermoform manufacturing can be done with what's called flake, which is a less processed form of rPET than bottles have to use. So for short-term solutions, it's hard not to look at the thermoforming community as somebody who could be doing more. The data tells us that about 10 years ago, they used about a third, or maybe a quarter of all the rPET in the US. Today, that number is down to about 10%, and we don't know what portion of that 10% comes from overseas. So as I'm talking about proven solutions and the role of packaging producers in making this happen, I don't think it's crazy heavy lifts to get this short-term solution going. And I think if packaging is the answer, thermoforms might be step one.
Great to call that out. Kate, why don't you keep digging in here on the policy pieces? And I think there's some questions about like minimum content standards. Is that a state thing or a federal thing? So why don't you talk about how you and your organization is thinking about policy for domestic supply?
Minimum content requirements are the best tool we have in our toolbox to solve this problem long term. It requires companies to use a minimum amount of recycled plastic in any type of plastic packaging or container. So for example, we have 5 US states that require some amount of recycled plastic in PET bottles, PET containers. That is definitely helping guarantee we have buyers for some of that material. We would be in a lot worse shape if we did not have those laws on the books. So those laws are helping. And we need more of those laws, and we need them across way more than just PET bottles. Look across the things Adam's listed, everything in my room, everything that we've been talking about, not just PET, but all plastic resins and products could be using more recycled content. So that is hands down the best tool that we have. APR, as you can tell, is strong supporters of recycled content policies, but we're learning that they have a downside. When some of these laws were passed 5 years ago, no one imagined that the companies would be importing from Thailand and Taiwan instead of buying from the US. But that's what we're seeing today as a result. So we need to refine those policies to focus more on prioritizing domestic materials. And we can do that a couple ways. First, certification. We need more transparency about what is coming in, where it came from, and those state laws require it to be post-consumer, meaning it came from households and businesses. We have a real lack of transparency on some of the materials that are coming in imported, claiming to be post-consumer recycled content. So certification is absolutely step one in better traceability and transparency. Second, we need incentives to buy domestic. We need to look at buying domestic first. We need reporting, and we need operational standards. So the EU, for example, is saying either buy from the EU or you buy from places that meet EU standards, meaning EU labor standards, EU environmental standards, right? You got to buy from a comparable kind of system. So we have companies that are investing in US labor and US environmental standards. We need to support those companies. So there's several things that we can do in terms of encouraging the domestic content in particular.
Certification and incentives.
Yes. And then if I can go a little bit longer, there's things we can do federally as well. So a lot of trade is managed at a federal level rather than a state level. So recycled content requirements, state, federal, provincial, local government, knock yourselves out. We can do all of the above. Federal level, we can look at things like tariffs. We can look at things like tax credits. So a great example is the Circle Act in Congress. It's the first ever tax credit bill specifically for recycling infrastructure. So Congress has for a long time taken many different actions to support domestic manufacturing. And we need to get Congress thinking recycling equals a domestic manufacturing industry. And so it should have the same tax credits for producing recycled content, tax credits for investing in recycling infrastructure, and all those other things that we do to support steel and other important US industries.
Just a quick clarification on what's a thermoform. Think of a salad container or takeout box for a sandwich, making sure we understand that to Adam's points. So in the policy landscape space, let's continue there a little bit more. I'd love to hear from our MRFs on, there's a bunch of questions of what's the role of CRVs or deposits for this material. Is it helping or hurting? Is that a solution? So Pete, you're off mute. You want to start with that? How should people be thinking about deposits as a policy for PET recycling?
Well, I'll start by saying we don't advocate for bottle bills or deposit return schemes. We think it makes curbside recycling programs more expensive, right? You're taking valuable fractions, historically valuable fractions in the form of PET, but certainly aluminum would go with bottle bills as well. So we have some concerns about that model. Listen, you absolutely increase capture rates. There's no doubt about that. But we're having a discussion about too much supply in the marketplace right now, right? So deposit return, increased capture, that material still needs to go someplace. So if you're going to go, and deposit systems can be expensive as well, right? So just those aggregation models, 1,000 dots on the map, whatnot, and they're less convenient, right? I think Connecticut's got like a 34% redemption rate. So, there's those things to consider as well. So,
So short answer is deposits are still a supply mechanism. They're
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah, yeah.
ensuring that old stuff turns.
The last 30 years of public policy has been supply focused, right? It's rates and dates. It's putting material in the system. To Kate's point, we really need to focus on the demand side of the marketplace.
Yeah. Anything different from your take, Brett?
I think the only perspective I would put on it is just so that the folks on the call understand most processors, the reason why you'll see processors like Pete and myself defend the valuable commodities that's in the bin is because most of the time we have I would say all processors, this is public knowledge, there's a pass through. So commodity revenues get passed through to the generating customer, these municipalities, and their programs in order to survive they need the valuable materials to be kept in those bins, or else those programs are closed down. So I hope that folks on the call realize, like when you talk about UBC rates or something like that, that doesn't hit our bottom line. There's a massive share that goes back to support those local programs. And so we are very protective of that bin space and making sure they get valuable materials within their bin to keep those municipal programs surviving.
Great. Folks, I think we need to jump in a little bit more into the quality question. So we're talking about why isn't it happening? How are we balancing imports versus exports? But I think there's a lot of questions about the quality. So maybe Adam, you can get us started here. Why? What are we hearing from bottle manufacturers about the quality of US material? What is the concerns about that? Is there a different quality from Asia? Can you just kind of start us off and then speakers jump in after Adam?
Yeah, I'll do my best. It's a really important topic and lots of different stories that we'll all hear about quality and rPET, and I think we have to take them seriously. So there's certainly a spectrum of quality out there, as there is with any manufacturing feedstock, as there is with virgin PET, and that's a fact. Um, Recycling is very interrelated, and the quality interrelates with demand. So, as much as we all agree that demand solutions are where the emphasis is needed, does quality affect that? Yeah, of course it does. Um, Different end users have different quality needs, and in that sense, it's almost kind of harsh to think of it as low or high quality. But historically, beverage users have had what's considered the highest standards of quality. They need a food grade product. Their marketing and brand team wants it to be perfectly clear without any flaw. The folks running the line want it to be very consistent in the way it behaves and actual performance. That stuff matters. End users like to see good quality. So, is there a role for our domestic system to up its game and increase rPET quality in the name of making it more attractive to more end users? Yes, of course. Is that the primary hurdle right now? It's hard to say yes. The general narrative out on the streets is that there is superior quality coming in from overseas. There is also skepticism, as Kate noted, that perhaps not everything that's coming in marketed as really awesome rPET is truly rPET. We don't know that it's not, but there are questions that need answers.
That's why we need the transparency and the traceability that Kate said, right?
Precisely. Yep.
Wasn't cutting you off. I was just emphasizing. Please continue.
Yeah, no, it's a good emphasis, and I think I've made all my good points here. Yeah, we need to see all those things. Absolutely.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Kate.
I want to jump in. We've talked a lot about imports being a huge part of the problem, and they absolutely are. But demand is low overall. And I want to come back to recycled plastic competes against new virgin plastic. Today, there is more new virgin PET plastic being produced than there ever has been in the history of the world. That's a lot. Second, it is at unusually low prices. The price of virgin PET earlier this month was the same price it was in 2019. Think about that. What else in your life is the same price as it was in 2019? Yeah, nothing. So recycled
Not even dog beds.
Not even dog beds, right?
Yeah.
So Brent, Pete, our recyclers, we're all facing increased costs, and yet we're competing against an industry that has somehow gotten cheaper and is producing more. And some of this is maybe not all this is maybe not all standard business practice. I'll flag that the US government actually launched a trade investigation earlier this month on 16 different countries for potentially illegal activities to undermine US businesses, including in plastics manufacturing. So what we are seeing is this crazy global oversupply of new virgin plastics. So not only are companies not using domestic recycled plastic, they're just going, you know what, maybe I'm just not going to buy as much recycled plastic right now because this virgin stuff is just, wow, unbelievably cheap. So I just want to make sure that folks are understanding that is a huge part of the problem happening right now as well.
Anything else on quality you want to jump in here, Murph?
It matters, right? But to Adam's point, every buyer, every facility, every technology has different needs. We've settled into a nice cadence with all of our customers over quality, with their quality teams. And there was some insinuation about some of that import material. If I'm going to say anything sensational today, some of it is not recycled. Full stop, period. I've had my
I
hands.
mean, some of the stuff that's coming in marketed as recycled content is not.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why we need transparency and traceability of material. So I think that's well said. Brent, what's on your mind?
The only thing I'd want to make sure folks, recognize is when we talk about quality too, the bottle-to-bottle makers, they like clear PET. And so when you have brands that still make blue and green, different color bottles, that's not great for bottle-to-bottle. That's okay for carpet, and that's why a lot of it does go into carpet. But if you really want clear, clean quality, you got to start out with the brands making clear PET bottles.
Right. I'm seeing a lot of questions about pricing and price points, and we're dismissing those because to answer those would be a violation of antitrust rules in this. And so this gets into the respect of the line of what we're doing here. So I do want to make sure we understand that we're not advocating that we boycott the import of PET or that anyone terminate a contract. We are encouraging companies to maintain their North American sourcing of material and to consider the importance of sourcing domestically in order to do that. So I just want to make sure we started with antitrust and we continue to underscore that. The other thing that we haven't talked about with the sourcing of domestic supply is the carbon impact of shipping this stuff around the globe over and over again too. And so I think there's a larger conversation to be had about this. Folks, we've got about 8 minutes left, and so I want to start wrapping us up with final takeaways. So kind of the lightning round of why is this problem solvable? Like we've been kind of doom and gloomy today, right? And Pete pointed out this has not happened before in the US. This is different. But the reason we're having this conversation is because we want to identify clearly. We don't hide away from the truth. We want to know the truth, know the challenges, the opportunities, and build the solution. So let's do a final round of what do you hope everyone will take away from this discussion today. Adam, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. Well, it's been great to be a part of this. Really thankful to be here with everyone. If I have one important takeaway, it's that packaging is the answer. And I hope I've repeated enough that there are proven levels of PCR usage that we have seen in packaging in the past with domestic rPET, with whatever quality ups and downs it might have. And so in many ways, a system returning to what it used to be is the antidote. I also would like to pause because I often remember to reflect on the big picture here. So what's happening on planet Earth right now is arguably a really good thing, right? The goal of plastic recycling forever was to create an indistinguishable commodity that could compete globally with every other feedstock, and it worked. This is a problem of globalization. There's plastic recycling happening now in China, Taiwan, Guatemala, Indonesia that never used to happen. And so our problem in North America PET recycling might actually be a good thing for planet Earth as a whole. We also just want to see planet Earth use all of the rPET that's being created. So that's the long-term solution, and that's my attempt at optimism. Thanks.
Good. I like your attempt at optimism. Brent, how are you feeling optimistic?
Yeah, so I'd say it start off with is we make a commitment to the municipalities, to our customers that generate this material, curbside programs, that we're going to sort, recycle, collect, properly manage this material. That's a big trust factor that we have. Anytime you have material that you collect that you don't have consistent or known homes for domestically, that becomes an issue with that trust factor. The one thing I hope that everyone realizes is we have just one EPR state that's gone live, and we've seen an enormous amount of volume increases there from our company. But we've got 7, 8, maybe 10 more to go. That's going to increase more supply, which is great. We all love this, but we've got to make sure that we work with all the folks on this call to make sure we bridge the gap between virgin and PET, so that more buyers will come into the recycled PET space. We just see in the next few years just more and more PET getting recycled curbside, which is great. This is all what we've been fighting for so many years now. But now we need to make sure we've got good homes for that material at the end of the day. And I think there's various forms of policy and other mechanisms we can use as an organization. But I'm optimistic we'll get it fixed. And we have to get it fixed because it's getting to be a bad situation as more and more of these facilities close down.
I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball in here before you pass it over to Pete. We haven't talked about the Middle East and the impact of that. I think Middle East and tariffs will be a good conversation for the third one that we have. But Brent and Pete, in 35 seconds, Brent, before you pass this to Pete, how should people think about the impact from the Middle East?
Well, I'd say if you look at the two things we always say that's causing this PET market today, low virgin prices and imports. And the two things that potentially could help out is virgin prices may increase. And we know with shipping lanes being restricted, then it's going to make import costs, container ship costs are more than they've been in a while. So potentially there's some upside there.
What do you see, Pete?
Well, public information, the price of virgin PET in Europe today is higher than recycled, right? And that hadn't been the case in 7, 8 years. So that's the Middle East. Now that's a whipsaw, right? That's the last 30 days. That's going to continue for the foreseeable future. If there's a ceasefire today, it's still 60, 90 days to work itself out. Brent mentioned EPR in Oregon. Listen, this needs to get solved. It needs to get solved domestically. The way that California SB 54 is structured, if these products are not being recycled, they're not allowed to be sold.
Yeah.
And so that's existential.
So there's a bigger impact here.
And listen, I'm going to offend some people that are on the phone or on this call. PET bottle is you mentioned LCA. It's got the least embedded carbon of any substrate. It's the most efficient way to get product to market. I'll stand by that science 7 days to Sunday, right? So this none of the brands want that material to go away.
Let me keep this moving because we've got 2 minutes and we will end on time, but I think this is the point of this. Kate, in 1 minute, and while we were doing that, Elisa, if we can pull back up the slides. Kate, what's our takeaway? You said at the beginning, this is not the failure of recycling. So what is it? What's your takeaway here?
Not the failure of recycling. This is serious. People need to know this is a serious situation, but that this is a solvable situation. And we should not have to rely on a war in the Middle East to solve this situation. That is not a long-term solution. And we have yet to see if that will even have a positive impact. That is all still speculative. So what do we need? Short term, we know there are buyers for these materials. Adam called out the packaging companies. They're the ones today who have the most immediate impact on solving this situation. Long term, we need to think about EPR, collecting the materials in, recycle content requirements, pulling the materials back through the manufacturing system. We need to think about tax incentives to support recycling as domestic infrastructure. So long-term policy solutions, short-term buyer commitments.
So just to hit this home, I agree with you. This is a failure of demand, and that's fixable. And we have to, because PET is the anchor of both the economics and the public trust of recycling. And so clear commitments to improve PCR will help restore this, but we've got to be quick, and there needs to be investment and policy to do that. If we go to the last slide, folks, I see many questions of how do we continue to get this information? Will there be more webinars? What about the past one? Scan this to get all of our information, and if you've registered for this, you'll have access for all of our stuff for free. So we at the Recycling Partnership take very seriously the opportunity and responsibility to take challenges head on. We are solving recycling toughest challenges together, and that's why we invite all of you to join us in doing that. So thank you again. Please join me in thanking Adam, Brent, Pete, and Kate for a robust discussion. The questions were even more than we can get to, but help set us up for what the next one should be. So thanks, guys. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.